Great day, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Strategic Possibilities Show, where we discuss success and growth to help you launch potential in your personal and professional life. My name is Emmett Ferguson, and I am your host. And today I've got an amazing guest. His name is Lefford Fate. I mean, that name in itself is just so. I think you have such a powerful name, Lefford, and I'm so glad to have you on the show today. And what I think is amazing about Lefford is he dedicated his entire career to the Air Force. And after Lefford, you got out of the Air Force, from my understanding, you dedicated yourself to helping develop more leaders. You're John Maxwell certified, and not only developing leaders like adult leaders, but you're also taking a community in Sumter, South Carolina, to help them become future leaders, the kids out there. And to get started, Lefford, can you share a little bit about your experience in the Air Force and what that was like, and how that, I guess, even helped to transform you into who you are today as a leader and someone who wants to do so much to give back to the community and everything?
Wow. Wow, Emmett. Well, hey, first and foremost, thank you, brother, for having me on. I really appreciate it. I mean, we could do a whole talk on the story of you and I meeting in Wise, Virginia, and you actually knowing my daughter, so that was crazy. But I grew up in a little town in Georgia, not much different from Sumter, except it was a little bit smaller. And I joined the Air Force when I was 17 years old. And I basically went from my daddy's house to Uncle Sam's house. And I learned a great deal in the Air Force. I traveled the world. I saw a lot of different things and actually grew. The reason I joined the Air Force because there wasn't a whole lot there in my hometown for me, and I know I wanted to have a better life. You know, the day I joined the Air Force, I was making as much as my dad was making. We grew up poor, and that was just reality. But I grew up with a lot of love. So I joined the Air Force at 17 years old. I went off and I made a life for myself. I had a lot of great mentors, a lot of great opportunities. The Air Force was a great way of life. And fast forward 30 years later, it was time for me to leave the military. Now, I'll go back a little bit and talk about some of the things, but I just want to talk about this transition thing. At nearly 31 years in the military, it was time for me to go. And I was terrified because when I didn't know how to be a civilian. I had never been an adult civilian, and I wasn't very strong as a person when I left the military. So again, I was really good at military stuff, but I didn't know how to be a civilian. I didn't even know how to speak civilian. And so I basically got into an organization called Toastmasters to teach me how to talk civilian, how to make a good transition from military to civilian. I did that and I joined the John Maxwell team. And the John Maxwell team basically was a group that helped me to become a better leader leading civilians, because whether you know this or not, leading in the military is a lot different than leading in the civilian sector. Based on the stars and bars and stripes that you have immediate credibility. In the civilian sector, you have to show up and show that you have something. They can't see you from a distance and say, this is what you are about. And sometimes in the civilian sector, based on what you look like, you can be judged. So it was an interesting transition. But what I learned from the military, what I learned from people that had gone before me, is that I didn't have to do this alone. And funny enough that we're talking about this is actually on Thursday, I'm a part of this program called Leaders Transition Institute. And what we actually do is to help military members, whether they're active duty, guard, reserve, or family members, make an appropriate transition to civilian life. And based on what I learned and a few more people that are on this foundation, we're helping people every month figure out their why and how they can be better after they leave the military.
That's
So,
amazing. That's amazing. And just to backtrack a little bit, in terms of, and I think that's so wonderful because a part of the reason why I wanted to hear more from you is because of that entire idea of developing that a mission after the military. I think that's a powerful message because I have known, some vets and come out of the military and then, they said they weren't sure what to do. And it's amazing to hear, that you were able to spend 31s in the military. And, when I imagine military, it's very like, you have authority and you've got power, you've got, a sense of leadership and all of that. But to hear that you were able to come out of that and you were still, even after 31 years, uncertain about certain things, I think that's very powerful. So to look back at what you were saying about going in from like 17 and you spent 31 years, was there like times when you were like, okay, maybe I should get out of the military now, and then maybe you stopped because you weren't sure about civilian life, or did you just love the military and you couldn't see yourself doing anything else really?
Well, when I came in, like I said, my initial assignment was for or enlistment was for 6 years, and I told myself I was either going to do 6 years or I was going to do 30 years, and that was because I was using it as a test to see what life was all about. And only a few times, I mean, in my life did I ever think that the military wasn't for me anymore. And so we'll start with this first 6 years thing. First 6 years, I was a cop. I was stationed in North Dakota. I grew up in Georgia, as I said, and the only snow I saw when I grew up was on TV watching like Wild Kingdom or Disney. So I didn't know anything about snow. My first base was Minot, North Dakota, and I was like, "Oh, they trying to get me." I don't know who I angered, but this isn't funny.
Okay, all right.
But I went there and I learned a lot because this is one thing I loved about the military. For me, the military was a meritocracy. It was like if you worked hard, if you studied hard, and if you did what you're supposed to do, you can advance. See, I didn't know if that was a way. I didn't know that was for real because I grew up. I was born in the '60s, so I grew up in the South during one of the most tumultuous times in our nation's history. We
Mhm.
had the civil rights movement going on. We had Vietnam. We had people were fighting against Vietnam, and and honestly, I grew up in an era where a person was judged by the color of their skin, not necessarily by the content of their character. So me joining the military, leaving the South, I was in a position where if my word and my deeds mattered.
Mhm.
And so I loved that about being in the military. I loved it. And to be honest, I liked having that as a part of my life. And I did think I didn't necessarily want to leave the military because if you watch the media, you watch the news, where I grew up, it wasn't necessarily equal, right? And
Right,
so I
in
felt
South Georgia.
very comfortable and strong in the military. So and then I go back. There was only one time, and I deployed. I was in Korea. I was in Iraq. I did all this other crazy stuff. I lost my mother while I was in the military. I lost my dad when I was in the military. All of that, but there was only one time in my military career that I said, and this was around the 20-year mark, that I started thinking that the military wasn't for me. That was the only one time, and that was strictly because I was in an environment where I felt that I was not allowed to excel. But for almost 31 years, I'll say for 6 months out of 31 years, I didn't feel like the work I put in would be rewarded.
Okay,
So,
so did you throughout the time, you grew up in a very tough time in American history, the 1960s, as you were talking about, and
that
especially
sounds
for.
really old to you, doesn't it? I,
I
I,
mean,
I heard you. I heard something in the background like, "Whoa!"
yeah, well, I only know of that from images, and just based on that alone. I mean, did you ever feel in a moment that, like, the military might not be, and this just talking like cross cultural or whatever. Did you ever think like the military might not be accepting or anything, or did you always feel like I knew that you knew that based on what you did, you could succeed and excel?
Well, I found that out within, I found that out within the first few years because we had this program called Social Actions, and they literally taught equal opportunity and treatment and human relations. I was in an environment where they taught us, hey, we're all on the same team. We got to get along. There's racial tensions and bigotry anywhere, everywhere you go in the world. But this was the most equal thing that I could imagine. Because again, imagine growing up in an environment where you were less than because of the color of your skin, and
Hmm.
then going into an environment where you got black, white, Asian, male, female, everybody was kind of like on the same page. That was an amazing feeling. And I guess now, the way we are now in society, where you people may find that odd, but there was a time, even though people complain about the way things are now, there was a time it was much worse. And and being in the military, I just always felt, listen, I rose to the top 1% of the top 1% of the enlisted corps. I could not have done that growing up where I was in the civilian sector.
That's very
So
powerful.
I
Yeah.
appreciate the military. I love the military for what they did for me.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that perspective because it's, one thing to think about what it was like back then, hear the stories and everything, but to share the idea of that entire shift from what was happening in the civilian world to what it was like in the military and what they were doing to ultimately make it an opportunity for everybody that had jumped in. So I think that's pretty profound that you share that perspective of that difference in civilian culture versus that military culture in life. And so you were talking about the 20-year mark, and you ended up doing 31. So obviously you did another 11 years, and without like familiarity of the military or anything. So after 20 years, what ultimately ended up being your like that thing where it's like the military is for me.
Well, it was I always, once I got in and started in the grind, I realized that the military was for me. At the 20-year mark, you can retire from active duty and go on and do other things in life. And so I was coming up on that 20-year mark. And when I was in Korea prior to my 20 years, and I was a leader, I was a superintendent, and I led a mental health flight, and I was doing big things. And I left there and went to England. And England should have been my best assignment. My wife's British. I would move to England. I had a chance to take her home, and I had gotten promoted. I had made senior master sergeant, which is a big deal. That's the top. Just I can go up to E9,
Mhm.
and based on my rank, there were a lot of people that outranked me. I went from a high level leader to a lower level leader, and the environment where I was working was basically, we have a lot of high ranking people. We want you here at this lower level, a mid level enlisted person. And I didn't get to thrive. I could just go to work. I didn't have very many responsibilities, and I didn't like doing that. Now, I want to pause for the cause. That is one of the things that I've heard a lot of veterans say when they leave when they leave military to civilian sector. They were at this higher level, they had these great responsibilities, they had a lot of stuff to do. And when they got out, they felt that they weren't getting to work to their capacity. And I say that now is that whenever a military member transitions, understand that when we get out, we start at a lower level than we were, but we're totally equipped to grow if you use your personal development, if you use the stuff that you learn and you use that grind. Eric Thomas liked to call it that dog, that thing that's in you that says, I can grow, I can get better. It's not what you get, it's what you become through the process. I was blessed to go through that process at the 20-year mark, understand what it took to go from a lower level and climb your way back up. It actually made me stronger. Since we're both Napoleon Hill people, you would recognize this. For every adversity, there's a seed of an equal or greater benefit. And so going through that thing at 20 years, it made me stronger. So I will say to all our veterans, all the people that are thinking about leaving the military or going in, that the situation, the process will make you stronger because you have to learn how to grind, how to grow through that process. So that was that difference. So I went from 20 and then I found out that I can do better and be better. And it just gave me more resilience. So the next, after that little period of time, that next 11 years were amazing. I think it was probably some of the best times in my life once I got over that little hump.
Very cool. And I haven't spoken with, I've spoken with a lot of vets who maybe, did their 4 or 8 year contract, but I really haven't, met too many veterans that have reached higher rankings. So it's very interesting to hear your perspective, Lefford, and to hear that surpassing it 20 years. Because what I think right now is, like you said, you started at 17, so you're 37 at the 20-year mark, and that's still really young and kicking. So just to learn a little bit more. So you did 30 or 31, and then as you were leaving, can you share a little bit about what that was like? You mentioned some difficulties and um having to get back into that civilian life. What does that mean in terms of like perception shift?
Well, it was actually, well, two things. One, it was fear of the unknown. It was a huge transition for me because I knew the military and I was really good. And you know what I mean? You're really good at something, then you have to do something different. It's almost like getting out of high school, going to college, or getting out of college, going to the workforce. You have to go through a transition, and we move out of our comfort zone. And I don't even really like to call it our comfort zone. I like to call it my familiar zone. It's something that I already know, and then to make that shift. So that was difficult in the mindset, and it's also that it's different because again, I was a command chief, master sergeant, top 1%. When I said something, people did it, and I could order people around. I didn't realize that because of that structure, that I just expected things to happen. So coming in the civilian sector where you had to learn how to be a better communicator and to get people to do things because they wanted to, not because you ordered them to, that was a bit of a shift. And it was interesting. That's why I think it's so important that no matter who you are, you go through personal development. As I said, I'm a John Maxwell guy. We're both Napoleon Hill guys. I think success leaves clues. So I'll tell anybody, go study people that do what you want to do or did what you did, and then learn from their successes and learn from their mistakes. And then it'll make life a little bit easier. Now, it can still be scary, but at least you would have prepared yourself for the transition. On another note, whether you, the people that you talk to, Emmett, the people that maybe listen to this, whether you spent 5 minutes in the military or 45 years in the military, I thank them for their service because all of us gave something of ourselves when we joined. Now, I can honestly say I got a lot out of it, but we all gave some. My brother was killed in Vietnam. He was a young man and he was killed in Vietnam. And so some people gave some and some people gave all. But your folk that made that decision to join and they're getting out, they have a skill set that will make them successful in anything that they do. So take what they've learned and press forward because there's a lot of opportunities out here in the civilian sector. It is, as much as I love the military, I love what I get to do since I've been out. When I left the Air Force, I ran a geriatric mental health program. I told you I lost both of my parents while I was in. Both passed away. My mom when I was really young, I was 21, and my dad in my last 9 years in. So I worked hospital and I worked with this mental health program to give back to the older people. I left there and I ran healthcare for the Department of Corrections. So I got a chance to help people and serve. Being a military member, my whole life was in the service. And now the last 3 years, I was running programs for the city of Sumter, working for community development and making sure our young people have a path for success. So you can continue to serve while you leave, but just figure out those things that you find that are important and relevant to you and what is needed in your community and your world. And you can be extremely successful by going through that process.
Wow, and that's definitely a topic that I'd like to hear more about here in a moment. But in terms of what you were just talking about, in terms of coming out and you had these things that you really cared about, like geriatric care and helping the city of Sumter. In terms of that, right? You spent 31 years, so I imagine you had a big part of what you did was helping to establish what is supposed to happen, or establish, we'll call it the mission. I don't know what exact
Right.
terms you would use, but you established the mission for the most part, for the people that are the newer people and more experienced and all that. And then I imagine there would be a big gap between somebody who spent 4 to 8 years in the military and someone who spent 31 years. Would you say for the people who have spent like 4 to 8 years, they're not coming out with experiences of, constantly setting that high level goal, or like setting that high level mission for yourself for leadership? If that is the case, what would you advise them to do in terms of, really accelerating?
Right. Well, I mean, I'll tell you again, if you're talking to people that spent 4 to 8 years in the military, they have had a great amount of training on communications, leadership skills, how to work on a team, how to be trustworthy, how to be a great teammate. So whether you've been in 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, 20 years, you have a lot of training and you have a lot of understanding. And if you and I think one of the fears that people do, and I had the same thing, no matter how long you've been in a place, there's the unknown and there's a fear of the unknown. But I'm here to say that the training that you have will serve you in a lot of different ways if your mindset is right. There's not a company in the world that doesn't want a well trained, a well equipped, a good communicator, and somebody that knows how to do teamwork and to set a schedule, show up on time, and work hard. That's some stuff that you're going to learn, and that you've already learned in the military, and that comes from even going through basic training. That you get that. And even if you are looking at running your own business or being an entrepreneur, you have a skill set in the military that can help you. But the reality is everything that you've learned, you can utilize to take you to the next step or take you to that next level. And it's easy to see that from where I am now. But I remember when I was about to leave, I didn't recognize or understand the skills that I had. I was actually, when you're scared, you're just scared. So I would tell people that I would be encouraged that if they serve, that they got a bright future. And as Eric Thomas, I love quoting Eric Thomas, he's the hip hop preacher. The best of your days will be the rest of your days. Your best days are to come. They've not passed.
That's phenomenal. I gotta look them up. But so what I really took away from that was the idea that to trust that what you've accomplished, what someone has accomplished within the military, has helped them build the skills that are going to carry over. And even if it might not be direct transfer in a new career, it at least the soft skills like communication and even in some of the hard skills will transition to make them incredibly valuable to anybody who.
Definitely,
Okay.
definitely. And another thing is, one of the things I think the military does, it teaches you how to learn how to do stuff. I mean, that there's probably cooler, sweeter ways to say that, but the reality is, if you've been in the military and you've had to make that transition, you learned how to make transitions, and that is hugely empowering. Somebody said that the illiterate of this generation aren't those that cannot read. The illiterate of this generation are those that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And one of the values of the military is that you have to unlearn being a civilian, right? Then you got to learn to be a military member. It doesn't matter what service. And then you got to learn your job. And then when you're getting ready to get out, you gotta unlearn that stuff and relearn some new stuff. So you're already in that understanding of what change is like and how do you change and how to learn and how to grow and develop. I would say a military member will have a head start on somebody that is their same age and the same experience if they have the right mindset.
And that is very important. Can you expand a little bit about what that means in terms of the right mindset?
The right mindset, the mindset that I may not know what I'm doing now, but I'm willing to go listen, learn, and then lead. I can I can look at a opportunity and I can listen for all the signs. I can listen for all the opportunities. I can listen to all the. I can learn as much as I can, and I'm willing to fail forward. Learn some stuff and then try again. Learn some stuff, try again. Learn some stuff, try again. Those are the keys to success. You don't have to know everything. You just got to be willing to go learn everything. That's a gift that being in the military has given us because nobody grew up knowing how to march, knowing how to do commands, take commands, how to do all the PP. Nobody was born knowing how to do that. You learned that. They walked you through that and you came out on the other end successful. So if you could do that, you could do anything if you put your mind to it.
That's a fantastic way of explaining, what that means to develop that mindset. And I imagine it means for veterans something much different than it means for me. But
Well, Emmett, I will say that because I was just thinking. Excuse me for interrupting. I was just thinking that because I feel like I'm speaking directly to somebody, some young person or not so young person that's leaving the military. But I will say the same thing to you, Emmett. You or anybody, whether they served in the military or not, if you have the mindset that I'm willing to do something and fail at it, but get better at it. And the more I do it, the better I get at it. I think that's for all of us. It's just the in the military, the time has been compressed a lot because we had to learn so much so fast. But you can do it. I mean, a young man doing the things that you're doing, you could take a course or a business or a college education and say, okay, this is what I know. This is what I don't know. This is what I need to know. Let me go give it a go. And then as you keep giving it a go, fail, 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 win, fail, fail, win, fail, win, fail, win, 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 win. It's a process. And if you follow the process, you can definitely get what you want out of life.
that was awesome. I feel like I feel a little bit more motivated now. My back's a
Cool.
little straighter. That's great. You are in leadership development beyond military and adults. You're also passing that on to the kids within the Sumter community. And based on what I know about the Sumter community, it at least used to be. I don't know what it's like today, but a pretty tough area to grow up in. And based on just things I've heard about it recently, my girlfriend was there for quite a few years, and she worked out there as a teacher and everything. And she tells me all types of interesting things about it. And I see you sharing things about helping teach kids to grow up and become better leaders in the community. And I see that it's like up and coming in South Carolina. So can you share a little bit about how you're involved with all that and just some of the things that you're looking to achieve and accomplish and help that community do?
Yeah, well, some of the stuff that we do, I mean, it can be tough here in Sumter, just like there's many places like this in the country, in the world. You know, I think that young people do what they see. And unfortunately, there's a high rate of single parent households or parents not in the household, a large number of incarcerated people here. And sometimes they don't know what to do. So we're doing programs to teach soft employability and life skills to our young people and teach them that if they can see it, they can be it and just encourage them. Because if you don't know what you can do, somebody can just show up and tell you anything. So I'm working with the school district, with the Chamber of Commerce, with the city and the county and the state, doing programs to help people see what they can be. And all the soft skills, again, education, the communication skills, the teamwork skills, the self concept skills, the stress management skills, we're teaching those. And we're not just telling, we're going through a process where we're having discussions with them, and we're putting them in team settings where they can work with each other to figure out what they want to do and what they want to be. There's nothing wrong with working in fast food. There's nothing wrong with working in factory. There's nothing wrong with working in manufacturing. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But we want to give people options so they can do what they want to do, fall in love with something, and then just do it. At the same time, I tell people all the time, sometimes you got to do what you got to do until you can do what you want to do. I grew up working in the fields. I have no problem with working in the fields, doing onions, tobacco, and do whatever it takes. But I'm working towards my goal. This I'm not just working here. So we're teaching people a lot that they can do as young people, and that they got anything that they want to do. If they're willing to work for it, they can definitely do it.
That's phenomenal. And so you're doing these trainings and community events not only for young people and adults and everything. Have you had an opportunity to bring the community to, I guess, people outside very much?
Yeah, well, in the state of South Carolina, people recognize what we're doing. Last year, actually this year too, but last year we were finalists in the All American City. We're one of the 20 finalists, and we went to Denver, Colorado, and talked about some of the things that we're doing in the community, so they can see it. We also were runners up again this year. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we don't know if we're going to actually go to Denver and compete for the top 10 spots. So if we don't go to be in person, we're going to do some kind of audio or video something. We're letting people know what we're doing. We're going out across the country and actually finding different programs, because one of my position as a support services director, community development falls under me. So I'm having me and my folk are going around the country finding out what are the best practices out there, because the biggest gap in life, Emmett, is not what we know and don't know, it's what we know and what we don't do. And I'm convinced that there are plenty of programs out there that are like a number one. And so either we build it or we go find somebody that's doing some really good things, and then we bring it back here to Sumter and try it out. And if we're doing something really, really well, we share it with other people across the country so they can do better. Because as the past President Obama said, that if somebody in Sumter suffers, I suffer. If somebody in San Diego suffer, I suffer. We're a global team. It's not just us, it's all of us. So I want to do what's best for our whole country and our whole world. And if we could start in a little Sumter and make it work, we'll do it. But if I have to go to where you live to find a good best practice, I'll go get it and bring it back home.
Nice. And that is ultimately, how I think ideas spread and, good ideas and they transfer to different communities and everything. That's
Yes, sir.
fantastic. Okay, great. And you're doing all this stuff and, I think you said that you're right now the director of community engagement or
Well, director of support services, but what support services is like, recreation, is events, and is community development and youth centers and stuff like that. So pretty broad spectrum, but community development is a part of that plan.
wonderful. And you're also John Maxwell certified trainer speaker, right? Trainer and
Yes,
speaker. Okay, so
trainer, speaker, and coach.
and you're an author, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
How
sir.
many books are you up to now?
4 books, and I've been featured in three more. Actually, I was commissioned by the Napoleon Hill Foundation to rewrite a book on everybody speak. So I'm trying to help people that are, one, our certified leaders become better communicators so they can spread the Napoleon Hill message. But the book will be for anybody that wants to communicate better, whether it's communicating with an audience or communicating with your child. So that book is due to be out in December, and I'm excited about it because this will give me a chance to help all the Napoleon Hill certified people across the world get better at what they do. Because you can know stuff, but if you can't communicate it, Emmett, that's a problem.
Right on. And all of the things that we have been speaking about and that Lefford is doing is going to be in the description for this podcast. If you are interested, Lefford, you were mentioning that you're doing things like, helping veterans with that community event and helping them with the transition and all of these things in the Sumter community. And, you're helping to spread and share great ideas, and also take in the ideas that are going to be most impactful to your community as well. So if anyone is interested in any of that, check out the description below. There's going to be information. And Lefford, if someone wanted you for a speaking engagement or anything like that, what would be the best way to contact you?
Well, you can check me out on my website, leffordfate.com. That's leffordfate.com. And also, I'm on this program called the Bash, and it is a forum for speakers in the South Carolina area. I've been doing a lot of traveling. I don't know if you saw this or not, but I went over to Sweden, went over to Caribbean, and we're scheduled to go speak at an event in Mexico in July, God willing, and COVID says so. We'll be going over July to do that. So I'm speaking internationally and on leadership, communications, team building. So there's a lot going on. And again, but leffordfate.com is probably the easiest way to reach out and connect.
That is awesome. I did not know that you were traveling the world speaking. I knew that you were doing a lot of stuff throughout the U.S., but I didn't know Sweden and upcoming Mexico. So that's fantastic. And with that, leffordfate.com, everybody, check out that website. And if there's anything else you'd like to share, Lefford, anything I might have missed, I'd love to hear it.
Well, you hit everything. I just want to do this. Everybody, be safe and take care of yourself out there. This is they call it unprecedented time. It could be a scary time for people, but for every adversity, I'll say it again, quoting Napoleon Hill, for every adversity, there's a seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. There is something out there for all of us. So just think about what you want to do and how you want to do it, and just go get it, because it is there for us. We live in an abundant society. Don't let anybody tell you that it isn't. We can do anything we're willing to work for. And that's all I got, brother.
Amazing. And that was powerful. And so very much grateful for having you on here. Thank you so much for doing this interview, Lefford. And everyone else, have a great night.
All right. I appreciate you, my friend. Great talking with you.